Hey everyone, welcome back to John's Watch. Today I'm taking a look at a new game called Dragon Quest III HD-2D Remake. This was released on November 14th, 2024. Its regular price is regular AAA price, so $80 Canadian or regional equivalent. And it's developed by Square Enix and Erdrick and published by Square Enix. And I just want to say thank you very much to Square Enix for sending me a review code for this game. I didn't recognize the name of the main developer, Erdrick, until I looked them up on Steam, and it turns out they also developed the Triangle Strategy game, which is another game in the HD, the titular HD 2D graphical style. The title of the game it basically tells you everything you need to know. This is a remake of the game Dragon Quest III, done in the HD 2D art style. If you don't know what that means, just think of games like Triangle Strategy and Octopath Traveler and Live Alive. If you're watching the video, then you're seeing the graphics on screen right now, but it's basically pixelated characters and environments, but with absolutely gorgeous lighting and shadows and quite a strong depth of field effect that gives, a little bit of like a diorama kind of appearance. And it's just a fantastic art style, and I love that. This is an art style that was started with the first Octopath Traveler, and it's just great that, this is now at, 5 games, I think, in the HD 2D art style. So I hope they keep going with it. I hope Square Enix keeps going with it and does loads more games like this, because, I really like this art style. Dragon Quest III, obviously, is the third entry in the Dragon Quest series of games. This game originally came out in 1988. This is a really old game. It originally came out on the Famicom in Japan and the NES in North America, and it had a few other re-releases and remasters along the way. It came out on SNES in Japan, the Super Famicom in Japan, but not the SNES in North America. It had a Game Boy Color port in 2001. A mobile port, a Wii port, Android, iOS ports, and now here we are finally with a more current, modern version. Despite being the third entry in the Dragon Quest series, my understanding as someone who's not familiar with Dragon Quest games at all, haven't played any before this, is that 3 is technically a prequel game. So despite it releasing after Dragon Quest 1 and 2, story-wise, the events in 3 take place before 1 and 2. So I was obviously, again, as someone unfamiliar with the Dragon Quest series, was a little apprehensive about jumping into this game and trying to review it, because it is the third entry in the series. But apparently from the little bit of research I did, and that my girlfriend did as well, because she was also very interested in this game, it's a perfectly fine one to start with. Some people recommend doing 1, 2, and then 3. Plenty of people recommend doing 3, then 1 and 2. So, yes, despite being the third game in the series, it's perfectly fine to play this as kind of a standalone entry if you're not going to play any more of them. In this game, you play as a hero. You can name your character. You can choose like a male or female body type, I guess. And then you're very quickly thrown into your adventure. Your mother wakes you up in your house. You can explore the starter town, your hometown a little bit, but you very quickly go to see the king to get approval for a grand adventure, and the king lets you know that your father had previously gone on a very similar adventure, so of course he's happy to approve your adventure so you can follow in your father's footsteps. And so the intro isn't quite as fast as the original. I think in the original, the NES version, you can be done the opening and the talk with the king in like 2 minutes or something. But it is very quick. You're very quickly off out into the world. Just before you go off out into the world, you go to a party building, not like a birthday party, like a team party. And you can basically custom build your own team members in your party. And by default, the game just recommends very, very standard characters. It recommended a warrior, a mage, and a priest. And I didn't know anything about the game, so I just took those and that they were fine. But you can actually go more in depth. You can completely custom make fellow adventurers to come along with you. You can give them different classes like Thief, Monster Trainer, Monster Tamer, one of those. A Gadabout, I believe, is one of the other ones, which I haven't got to mess around with yet so far. And so I put together my starting team just with the recommended NPCs. Didn't customize them or anything, I just went with what the game recommended me. And then a few hours in, I looked up, you know, what's the best team in Dragon Quest III. And I then found out, probably about an hour and a half before I learned in-game, was that once your characters reach level 20, they actually have the option to switch jobs. So, for example, I think I changed my priest to a gadabout, or maybe it was the mage to a gadabout, something like that. So you're not fully locked into whatever classes you chose at the beginning. You can change all of your companions' jobs, assuming they've reached level 20. You just can't change your main character's job because he's the hero. That is his class, and you know, that can't be changed. Combat is your typical JRPG fare. I was a little bit surprised at like the camera angle that they chose when I first got into combat. I was expecting it to be more like Final Fantasy, I guess, where like you've got your enemies over on one side of the screen and you've got your party on the other side of the screen and they're facing off. But instead in Dragon Quest, it goes for more of like a first-person view. So your party members are kind of behind the camera and you just see the enemies ahead of you looking straight at you. It's just an interesting camera angle for combat, and I don't think I've seen that in other JRPGs. A fun feature of the remake is that it does have the option to have the computer control your party members. If you've played later Persona games, by default that's on, where the computer controls your party members. I think it was Persona 3 Fez literally didn't have the option for you to control your party members. The computer had to. And this can obviously be disabled if you don't want to play like that, but as someone who's, you know, new to Dragon Quest, I do not mind, even in Persona, I don't mind the computer controlling my party members for the most part, unless it's a really difficult boss. So I just left that setting on and just controlled my character, which was quite fun. You've got the option of attacking with a melee weapon or various spells. You learn spells as you level up. I think it's depending on class as well, but as the hero class, I seem to learn pretty much every spell that my companions was learning as well. Something interesting is that you can encounter multiple different kinds of enemies in various in combat scenarios, and they'll typically be grouped together. So like you might come into an encounter and there'll be like 6 enemies on screen, but 3 will be one type and 3 will be a second type. And depending on the weapon you've got equipped or the spell you use, you can target whole groups of enemies. But the key, except for a couple of specific spells that I did not have access to, is that you can only target that specific group. So, you know, in this scenario we've got 3 of one and 3 of another. If I target a group, I'm only hitting one group of 3. I can't do any damage to the second group of 3, pretty much. And I quickly found that if I equipped my character with a whip weapon class, I was able to do my regular melee attack and hit groups of enemies, and it's so satisfying when you go into an encounter and there's 6 of the same type of enemy, because I would just whip them all and take out some of them in one go, and it was very satisfying. But like I said, the enemies do have to be grouped up, so let's say you have 4 of one kind of enemy, but between the 2 groups of 2 you've got a different enemy. You can't hit all 4, you can only hit the 2 that are together. So yeah, just a fairly different combat than what I was expecting, but when it gets down to it, it really is just JRPG, turn-based combat, where you choose your, and occasionally your party members' moves throughout the battle. This game does have random encounters, which, you know, obviously is not surprising when you think that it's a 1988 game. That's just how JRPGs and turn-based games had been for years and years until somewhat recently, I guess. Well, Persona was, what, like 2006? That didn't have random encounters, that's pretty good. But yes, for a long time, especially in JRPGs, encounters are random. You don't see anything on the map in front of you to run into to trigger an encounter. It's just, every time you take a step, there's a chance you'll get an encounter. And as far as I found, there's no option to disable encounters completely, which isn't too surprising, but I've been playing the Final Fantasy Pixel remasters this year. I've done the first 3 and have taken a much longer break between 3 and 4 than I was expecting to. But in those games you do have various quality of life, modern convenience options like scaling up how much experience you earn, how much gold you earn, but you've also got the option to completely disable random encounters, which is, you know, obviously not good to do the whole game because then you're never going to level up. But it's really nice if you're low on health and you know you're near the end of a dungeon, just to toggle them off quickly so you can get out is quite nice. So I was sort of expecting to see an option like that in this game, but yeah, there's no option to turn them off as far as I could tell. Speaking of Final Fantasy, it definitely reminds me of those Final Fantasy games, the Pixel remasters, quite a bit. Moving about in the open world is very similar. Moving about in the dungeons is very similar. Even the music is quite similar, although just a vague thought I had in my head when I was playing this was, I was kind of thinking like, oh, this is Final Fantasy, but like the Disney version. Everything seems like a little bit brighter, a little bit more Disney, and the music especially, the soundtrack of this game, definitely makes me think of just Disney soundtracks for some reason. At the time of recording, I've played 6 hours of the game. How Long to Beat says that the main story is about 25 hours, main and sides is 36 hours, so I'm, you know, a good amount of the way through the game. And for all 6 of those hours, I played on Steam Deck. And Steam Deck's native recording feature has fairly recently come out of beta. So it's now included in Steam and on Steam Deck by default. So all the footage you're seeing in this video is all recorded on my Steam Deck, which is why it's all 720p and probably doesn't look amazing if you're watching this on a big screen, but playing it on Steam Deck, it looks great, and it runs really, really well. One tweak that was suggested on ProtonDB was to turn the TDP setting down from, I think it was from 12 to 10. Yeah, it just says lower the TDP to 10 watts without any impact on the performance. And so I just followed that guide because pretty much whenever I start a game up on Steam Deck, I check it on ProtonDB just to see if there's any helpful suggestions like that. And performance and battery life were really, really good. My Steam Deck got like a little bit warm for sure, but I think it would give me about 3.5 hours. I never played more than like an hour and a half at a time, so I just played it in bed before going to sleep. But yeah, there was never any risk of my Steam Deck dying because it was just chomping through the battery. It was very reasonable on the battery. And it was 60 FPS all the way through. There were just, so far there's been 2 instances where I've seen it drop. One was at this water area, so I'm wondering if maybe like the reflections on the water was just a bit much. And I think it dropped to about 40 or something there. And there was a location called the Shrine of Promise. The exterior there also dropped to about 40 FPS. But apart from those 2 instances, 60 FPS all the way through. So yeah, it's absolutely fantastic to play on Steam Deck. One thing I have to mention is that this is a remake of a 1988 game. So it's been out for ages, you know, almost 40 years to fix issues and stuff with the game. And it actually has grammatical issues at the end of every battle, which is really, really bizarre. If you finish a battle with a group of one kind of enemy, the text at the end will say, "The enemy are defeated," which is completely grammatically incorrect. It should be, "The enemies are defeated," or "The enemy is defeated." But then if you defeat a group of 2 different types of enemies, it'll say, "The group of enemies are defeated." And this is also incorrect, because the "of enemies" part of the sentence is kind of optional for all intents and purposes. So this is saying "the group are defeated," which is again incorrect. It should be "the group is defeated." And I have no idea why this is an issue in the game. and at the time of recording, it's been out for 10 days, and it was last patched 2 days before the game released, so it hasn't had any post-release patches. And I'm just blown away that at such a simple and very obvious error is there in the game. Very, very strange. I was also expecting a lot more from the UI, because the UI is honestly quite comparable to the Final Fantasy Pixel remasters, which, again, the clue's in the title. Those are just remasters of old games, so, you know, there's only so much you can do with the menus and stuff. But this is a remake. This is a full-on remake in Unreal Engine 4, and the menus are just really, really bland and uninspired and quite lacking. Even on the title screen, you've literally got 2 options, which is start and exit. Just not much there. And the game is also lacking some quality of life features. For example, when you change your character's equipment, there's a really handy feature where you can hold down Y if you're playing a controller, which I was, which will auto-equip your characters with the best gear in your item bag, which is wonderful. I love those features. But when you change a character's equipment, instead of returning their now unused equipment to the bag, it stays in that character's specific bag. So if you change a character's equipment, you then have to go into that character's bag and take out their old equipment and move it back to the bag. And so if you want to very quickly go through and auto-equip your whole party, you can't do it very quickly because you auto-equip the first character, go get the old armor from the first character, auto-equip the second character, go get the old equipment from the second character, and you repeat that for the whole thing. Again, it's just something that I would excuse in a remaster, but I can't really excuse in a full-on remake that they've had 26 years to do. Overall, I've really been enjoying the game. I think I would definitely say that I prefer the Final Fantasy games, like 1, 2, and 3 were great fun. I also like their fairly short experiences, and this one definitely feels a bit longer, but it's still fun. I just prefer Final Fantasy, I think. There you go, that was a look at Dragon Quest III HD-2D Remake. Thank you guys very much for watching. Make sure you leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys later. Bye!